Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 30th of April of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the 30th of April of 2026 from its very beginning promised to be a very promising day. And this morning started with the statements that were made by the President of the United States of America, and he said that I think Putin was ready to make a deal a while ago. I think some people made it difficult for him to make a deal. And most likely Trump was talking about Zelensky. The next statement was also very interesting and very important. I suggested a little bit of a ceasefire to Putin. I think he might do that. So this is a very important situation because the Russians also confirmed that yesterday there was a talk between the President of Russia and the President of the United States of America. And as a result of these talks, the Russians stated that Putin is ready to declare a ceasefire by Victory Day. But from one side, the Russians are ready for a ceasefire, but from the other side, we see that all these announcements made by the President of States and President of Russia trapped the President of Zelensky. So right after the Russians and the Americans confirmed about their readiness to a ceasefire, Zelensky made a very big mistake. He said Zelensky vows for long-term ceasefire instead of short-term proposed by Moscow. Ukraine seeks peace and is doing the necessary diplomatic work to bring this war to a real end. We will clarify what exactly this is about, a few hours of security for a parade in Moscow, or something more. Our proposal is long-term ceasefire, reliable and guaranteed security for people, and a lasting peace. So Zelensky tried to make a situation when both the Russian president and the President of the United States of America will beg him or will ask him for a May ceasefire. And he believed that that was exactly the situation. But few hours later, the Russians made their final statement on this matter, and the Russians stated that Kiev's reaction is not needed to implement the ceasefire. This is the decision of the head of the Russian state, and it will be implemented. So this is a very important thing. Russia will declare a ceasefire on Victory Day and without any reaction from Kiev. This is Putin's decision and will be implemented. So now we need to understand one important thing, that the Russians are trying to tell Ukrainians and Europeans and the United States of America that there will be a ceasefire. But now Zelensky must make a decision. Either he will confirm and accept this ceasefire, but it is very difficult to imagine how Zelensky is going to do this after he made a statement about this thing that Ukraine seeks peace and is doing necessary diplomatic work and many other different things from this statement. And if he accepts the Russian ceasefire, this means that these words have no value. And if he doesn't accept the Russian ceasefire, then most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to attack the territory of the Russian Federation during the 9th of May or during these days, to attack the territory of Russia with hundreds of drones and maybe even missiles. And obviously, this possible attack during the May holidays on the territory of Russia would have significant consequences for Ukraine. And as we discussed during the previous days for many times, the Russians are not active right now. We have some offensives along the Sumi region. We have the Russian offensives in the Constantinovka, Zaporozhye directions, but the Russians are waiting when all these holidays end. And only after the end of holidays, the Russians most likely will begin their major offensives and major attacks in full strength. And of course, if the Ukrainians attack the territory of the Russian Federation during the May holidays, this will most likely ease the Russian decisions on this matter. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates, and first we're going to talk about the Dobropolye direction, where we have huge changes. During the previous 24 hours, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes, the Russians established complete control over the settlement of Novooleksandrivka, and this village is located to the north of the settlement of Grishna and to the south of the settlement settlement of Dobropolye. But this is not a very big village, as you can see, just several dozens of buildings, and that's it. But the most important value of this village is that the village is located basically on the Ukrainian side of this natural barrier, the river of Grishenka and the river of Balka Vtoroi Yar. So now the Russians most likely have a stable foothold on the Ukrainian side of this water barrier, and from these positions the Russians will continue offensive operation, most likely first of all in the northwestern direction, with the purpose to take under control the villages of Vasilievka and then the village of Mirna, with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area, and from this foothold Russians most likely will continue offensive operation further. Furthermore, from these positions, most likely the Russians will be able to finish the battle for the Zaporozhskaya mine, which is located to the west of Rodinskaya, because from these positions the Russians have chances to encircle the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine with aviation. The Russians, according to information we have, are going to intensify the number of bombs and aviation strike they're using. The Russians planning to increase the number of attacks till 20,000, 24,000 per month, and this is a very big number. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, the Russians once again managed to improve their positions, and this time once again the Russians improved their positions through the eastern flank of the city of Konstantinovka. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 28th of April, and this is already the end of the 30th of April of 2026. The Russians, as we can see, improved their position significantly through the eastern flank, and the Russians continue advancing. As for the western flank, during the previous 24 hours, lots of attacks were recorded. The Russians continued bombing the western parts of the city of Konstantinovka with aviation, trying to reduce as many as possible temporary deployment points and strongholds of the armed forces of Ukraine till ruins. In coming days, we expect additional changes in this direction as well. The Slavyansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, the biggest number of updates was recorded right exactly in this area. The Russians attacked, and the Russians basically established complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines. We see that the Ukrainians have less and less foothold in this area, which means that Ukrainians have less and less logistic roads, evacuation roads for their military purposes, which means that the Russians every single day are improving their control over these lines, which means that Ukrainians every single day suffer more and more losses. In coming days, most likely we'll see significant changes on the ground, especially in the area of the settlement of Novooleksandrivka and of course the settlement of Krivoluka. The city of Liman. No changes on the ground were recorded during the previous 24 hours. The Russians, according to different reports we received several days ago, were forced to fall back from the city limits of Liman, probably for regrouping, but most likely after May's holidays end, the Russians will continue offensive. The northern directions. During the previous 24 hours, we received a very important update, first of all from the Sumi direction. According to information we have, the Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Korchakivka, which is located to the north of the city of Sumi. And this is a very important progress. I would like to remind you that the Ukrainians had their second defense layer between the villages of Khotin and Marina, and this was a very powerful defense layer in front of the Russian forces and in front of the Russian offensive. But since the beginning of this year, the Russians have captured two settlements through this defense layer. We're talking about the settlement of Mala Korchakivka and the village of Korchakivka, which means that the Russians have almost cut this defense layer into two several pieces, and now most likely the Russians will try to establish complete control over these two villages, over these two pockets separately. And when Russians finish the battle for these big pockets, for this big defense layer, the Russians will have no barriers to continue offensive operation further in the southern direction with the purpose to attack the city of Sumi from the north. Probably by the same time, the Russians will finish the battle for the settlement of Miropolia. The group of forces north stated that currently there are very heavy clashes in this area. We received lots of videos from this territory of how Russians were reducing to ruins, strongholds and temporary deployment points of the armored force of Ukraine. But it seems that in coming days the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this territory under the pressure of Russians. And of course, the Russians have a very big pace of offensive operation in the Krasnopolye direction, and these are the changes on the ground during the previous several days. The Russians, as you can see, have improved their positions significantly, and now the Russians continue offensive operation towards the village of Mikhailovka. Most likely in coming days, the Russians will finish the battle for the settlement of Ryasne, and all these things will allow the Russians to begin their major offensive operation towards the settlement by the name of Krasnopolye, which is a very big settlement, and if Russians can take this settlement under complete control, then the Russians will be able to create a very powerful foothold and very powerful base before the beginning of the Sumi offensive operation from the southeast. The Russians will be able to begin concentration of their troops in this area. They will be able to bring additional infrastructure that most likely will ease the further Russian offensive operation in the northwestern direction and of course in the southeastern direction, with the purpose to cut the railways between the cities of Sumi and Kharkiv. So the Sumi offensive, as we discussed many times, probably is one of the most important directions for the Russians. The situation is very complicated along the line of combat contact. For example, the Russians stated that just during the previous year, just during this year, since the beginning of the year, 127,000 Russians have signed a contract to serve in the military, and another 10,000 soldiers have become volunteers, said Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council and the chairman of the United Russia Party. As of today, this year, it's 127,000. This is a very big number, and just 4 months have passed since the beginning of this year, and which means that by the end of the year, most likely the Russians will be able to sign more than 400,000 contracts with Russians. So, which means that the Ukrainians have no other option but to intensify the mobilization process. And according to information we have, Zelensky today signs decrees extending martial law and mobilization until August 2nd. And you know that today is the 30th of April of 2026, and according to information we have, the current mobilization and martial law expire on the 4th of May of 2026, which means that Zelensky, for the first time probably since the beginning of the special military operation, extended both martial law and mobilization just 4 days before these two processes expire. And this is probably, we have never seen such situation. Very difficult to understand why Zelensky decided to extend both mobilization and martial law for so late. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation. So May holidays are ahead of us. Obviously, the Ukrainians don't have resources to carry out a major offensive operation with the purpose to answer the territory of Russia, let's say, during these May holidays. But one thing is clear, the Ukrainians during these days are able to carry out a massive attack using hundreds of drones to deep inside of the territory of Russia. For example, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians once again attacked the territory of the Russian Federation using hundreds of drones, and once again the Ukrainians mainly were attacking the settlement of Perm, more precisely its objects of energy infrastructure, and once again the Ukrainians attacked this object and PS Perm. So this is the video that we received today from this area. As you can see, a very big white smoke over this object of energy infrastructure. Later we received a certain analysis and and according to this analysis, all these refineries, all these tanks were completely destroyed or significantly damaged. Most likely in coming days, the Ukrainians will continue attacking this territory with the purpose to destroy these 3 last tanks for oil. And if they do this, then they will destroy this object of energy infrastructure completely. So during the day, we received lots of videos from the city of Perm from different angles. Civilians were making a video of the consequences of attack on the city. Here we have another picture. Here we have another video, but from another angle. Here we have the same situation. And during the possible massive attack, the Ukrainians may attack the city of Perm during the next days, during the May holidays, with the purpose to destroy this object of energy infrastructure completely, or the Ukrainians during the May holidays could attack or may attack the settlement of Tuapse with the purpose to destroy the Tuapse refinery completely. Because these days we received lots of very interesting updates. For example, today, after the fighting effort in Tuapse was declared, a complete and American RQ-4D Phoenix reconnaissance drone registered in Italy immediately appeared in the skies over the Black Sea. So now the Ukrainians, the reconnaissance drones of NATO are flying in this area, and they're doing just one thing. They're collecting as many as possible intelligence and reconnaissance operation about the city of Tuapse and about the status of the Tuapse refinery. Probably, and we believe that if the Ukrainians break the May holidays ceasefire, most likely they will attack either the city of Tuapse with the purpose to destroy completely the Tuapse refinery, or the city of Perm, or the Ukrainians will attack both cities. Everything is possible, but one thing is clear: if it happens, this is going to be a significant escalation, and most likely the Russians will strike back. And today, pro-Ukrainian sources and Zelensky himself stated that the Russians are planning to attack a very important and critical objects of infrastructure of the territory Ukraine. Most likely, the Ukrainians don't have this intelligence information. Most likely, the Ukrainians came to this conclusion because they understand they are attacking very important objects on the territory of Russia. And if the Russians strike back, most likely the Russians will attack several objects of critical infrastructure through Ukraine that can lead to shortage of water and houses and apartments. As for the previous day, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine using hundreds of drones, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning stated that the Russians used 207 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. And once again, the Russians attacked the city of Dnipro. We have a lot of videos on this matter. In this video, for example, we can see a Russian drone that was attacking something in the central part of the settlement. Here we can see a big fire over the settlement, and the Russians attacked the city of Odessa. Once again, 200 drones the Russians used to attack the southern regions of Ukraine. And as for the cities of Odessa and Dnipro, we see that the Russians are not stopping. They continue attacking these two settlements almost every single day. And this is a very important situation because the Ukrainians, they attack different parts and different towns of Russia. And of course, there are pauses sometimes between strikes. But when talking about Ukraine, when talking about the cities like Dnipro, Zaporozhye, and Kharkiv and Odessa, these towns and these cities, the Russians attack every single day using dozens and dozens of drones. We have covered most of the updates regarding the situation in Ukraine. Now let's talk about very important updates from Europe. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, Sweden's seized a Russian bark carrier Kaffa in Baltic Sea. Ship allegedly carried Ukrainian grain. So this is another escalation. We see that the European countries continue preparation to establish complete blockade of the Baltic Sea. But we need to understand that we won't see the blockade itself through the Baltic Sea. For example, the Russians most likely will be able to leave St. Petersburg and to move through the Baltic Sea Furthermore, most likely the Russians will be able to enter the North Sea, but most likely the Russian vessels, the Russian ships, commercial vessels would be blocked by the coalition of the United Kingdom and several more countries in this area. According to information we have, Russia's shadow fleet will be the United Kingdom is trying to prepare a coalition. Probably the states like Norway, probably Finland, Sweden, Belgium, United Kingdom itself, Ukraine, of course, will join this coalition, and most likely the Russian ships, the Russian shadow ships will be blocked right exactly in this area. So in the place where the Russians have no influence, and obviously where the Russians will not be able to do anything, neither with drones or missiles or something like this. So the Russians, most likely it's time for them to prepare for this situation and to find a way how to fix this issue and how to prevent the blockade of North Sea. Now let's discuss the situation in the Western Africa. We see that the situation in this region is very complicated, and the situation continues deteriorating. We have reports that the Russians saved control over the base in the southern parts of Kidal, in the northeastern part of Mali, but during the day we received report that separatists began offensives in the central and the southern parts of the state of Mali, and today the settlement of Hambori came under control of separatists. We have videos from this area how soldiers of different groups and different fractions of Mali were taken under control and making videos from the settlement. Furthermore, we had reports that separatists began offensive operation in the northern parts of the state of Mali, and today another settlement came under their control. Furthermore, by the evening of the 30th of April of 2026, we start receiving lots of updates that separatists began entering the settlement of Bamako, the capital of Mali, from different directions. As of now, it's too early to say that the Russians and the government forces of Mali have lost control over the state. Obviously, we are just at the beginning of this conflict, but this is another conflict that will most likely force the Russians to spend additional sources and to stabilize the situation in this area. Additional resources, the stable situation in Mali requires significant resources from the Russian side: equipment, vehicles, additional contracts, and many other different things. It is going to be a very difficult and complicated situation for the Russians. As for the Middle East, probably the most important update is that the United States of America is going to deploy hypersonic missiles in this area, and most likely they will test them. And they will test them with the purpose to suppress the ballistic launching systems of the Iranian side. So this is the main problem of the United States of America, the time they need to react to attack these ballistic launchers. So aviation is not enough to discover these ballistic launchers and to destroy them. So the United States of America believes if they deploy hypersonic missiles, they will be able to react very fast on the ballistic launchers of the Iranian side, and they will destroy them as soon as they discover them. So this is most likely the plan from the United States of America, and we will see how these things are going to develop. At the same time, today the President of the United States of America published a very interesting picture, and today he called the Strait of Hormuz as a Strait of Trump, which is obviously a very interesting situation. An image has been shared showing the Strait of Hormuz as the Strait of Trump. So by this, the President of the United States of America is trying to tell the world, and first of all to the Iranian side, that the United States controls the Strait of Hormuz completely without any chances for anybody in the world to retake this control back. So let's wait and see what is going to happen next. But as of the end of 30th of April of 2026, we see that the oil prices are very high. Oil markets closed with oil prices on the level of $105 and $114 per barrel for WTI and Brent, and these are the biggest prices for the end of financial week, for the end of any week, trading week since the beginning of this conflict. So tomorrow is Friday. The United States of America has a day to make the situation when oil prices will be dropped. If they can do this, if this situation happens, then most likely the United States of America will postpone the moment with attacks on the state of Iran. But if it doesn't happen, then the United States of America will not have any other option but to act, and to act very fast. And that's it for today. The Military with Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.